Although the infamous robber Butch Cassidy was far from perfect, he was not entirely morally corrupt. Throughout his career as a robber, Butch Cassidy's crimes were not violent. He resisted the violent influence of other outlaws, and he made an effort to turn his life around and pursue a career as a legitimate rancher. Butch Cassidy was arguably the most notorious robber of the 19th century. Cassidy was born Robert Leroy Parker in a poor Mormon family in Utah. Cassidy renamed himself Butch because he had worked for a butcher and apprentice, and Cassidy after a rancher he had worked for named Mike Cassidy, partially out of admiration for Cassidy and partially to protect his family's name when he began to commit crimes. Although he successfully stole money countless times, he was trying to create a legitimate opportunity to become a rancher. He desired a better life for himself, but held a moral line when it came to killing people in his crimes. Butch Cassidy was not a violent man. He did not kill a single person during his long career as a robber. In 1880, Butch Cassidy walked into a closed clothing store and took a pair of jeans and a pie. He left an IOU, promising to pay the store owner back. Instead of being seen as a monster, he was seen as the Robin Hood of the West, and he stole from big businesses. Butch Cassidy resisted the influence of other outlaws. Butch Cassidy was selective about who was able to join his gang. In one heist, when Butch Cassidy and his group of bandits called the Sundance Kids were robbing the Pacific Union train, an employee locked the door into the train, preventing him and his group from entering. They blew down the door open, and while the other bandits wanted to shoot the innocent man, Butch Cassidy, admiring the man's courage, let him live. Butch Cassidy always considered using a gun as a last resort. Even though the people he was surrounded by didn't always think twice about shooting, Butch Cassidy held himself to a higher moral standards than the people he was surrounded by. Butch Cassidy made several efforts to turn his life around and perhaps leave his life of crime, but the odds were considerably against him. When Butch Cassidy became a ranch owner, he entered hostile territory where there were bigger ranches surrounding him. This highlighted a long-standing problem where wealthy ranch owners squeezed out anybody new who tried to establish themselves as a new rancher. The rancher set him up by selling him stolen horses without a receipt and then reporting the horses as stolen. In this case, he was an innocent man. He had been tricked. Butch Cassidy was thrown into a prison for his crimes. Butch Cassidy embodied the essence of the Wild West, where an outlaw could have a heart and moral compass, but very limited opportunities for earning a living honestly. He also resisted the influence of other outlaws that he worked and lived with. He did not become as violent as many of his accomplices. He was in fact a criminal, but when one looks past the surface, there was a person attempting to turn around his life and make an honest living in a hostile territory where the true crooks were disguised as legitimate, wealthy ranch owners, and perhaps some of the few authentic patriots were those like Cassidy who confronted this social norm and then tried to make an honest living.